We are very pleased that our next speaker is Robert Iopa, a local Native Hawaiian architect, owner of WCIT Architecture. It's really a pleasure to have someone here who really understands the Native Hawaiian community and understands what it means to create indigenous spaces. I know that many of my colleagues from across the system, the library system, are interested in, what does it mean to have an indigenous space? What does that look like? How do we go about framing those questions, both for our staff and for administrators? And so, along with Michael's presentation this morning and Robert's, this will help inform our conversation. After Robert's presentation, there will be a chance to have a conversation with Michael and Robert as well before lunch. So, thank you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mike Cole. I'm Rob Iopa, WCIT Architecture. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure speaking. I was just talking to Michael about these types of opportunities and why you would think there'd be many more opportunities to speak about indigenous architecture and indigenous design. At least in my career, I've found those opportunities very few. So I'm very appreciative of being invited, fascinated by the dialogue that's already begun with the presentation that we just saw, and hope to share a little bit about the way we think and how we approach space and place. I titled the presentation Nana I Mua, Nana I Hope. It's a Hawaiian proverb, Olelo no e ao, that essentially translates to looking forward and looking back. So in the spirit of kind of the beginning of our presentation, I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts with you. On the looking back side, I think it's probably best that I start with a little bit of my background. So I kind of consider my life in three specific periods, both personally and professionally. So the first period, born and raised in Hilo on the Big Island of Hawaii. Rather kind of normal childhood, as I would expect it. I was raised with a father who was half Hawaiian and half Chinese, and a mother who was mostly of European ancestry. Affectionately, we call it here Haole. So I'm half Haole, quarter Hawaiian, quarter Chinese. My grandfather, my Hawaiian grandfather, was a very strong and hardworking and humble man who was taught, as he was raised, not to be Hawaiian. In doing so, where he had been raised speaking Hawaiian in his household, he was never allowed to speak Hawaiian. He told my father never to speak Hawaiian. And as my father was growing up, he was told that his way of being should be more Western-like. At the same time, on the other half of my family, my mother was from European ancestry, came from California, moved here when she was a teenager, and during that period of time, she went through her own kind of cultural identity crisis, if you will, right? So imagine a teenage girl from California moving to a very small town in Hilo with a mix of ethnicities that she probably hadn't seen before in her entire life. So as I was growing up, right, like I lived on Hawaiian homestead land. I had one half of my family that was very kind of Western-based in thinking. And the other side of my family, who I knew was Hawaiian, and I knew we had Chinese ancestry, and I knew elements of that culture, but it never really informed me in the way that I felt really that I knew my culture. So that was the environment I was born and raised in. I was a little, in Hawaiian we call it kolohe, a little bit of a rascal in high school, and didn't really have an opportunity to explore a range of colleges when I got out. My grandmother asked me what I wanted to do, and on my graduation day, I said I wanted to be an architect. I had no real idea what an architect was. I knew what blueprints were, and I knew that you would build off of blueprints. We had a family friend who was an architect, long flowing hair, and he dressed nice, and he would wave his hands when he was talking. And I was thinking, shucks, whatever he does, that's got to be pretty good. So I had an interest in math and an interest in precision, right, of mechanical drafting, and that led me to architecture. Second period of my life, after high school graduation, I moved to California. I enrolled in junior college, did well in junior college, and went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where I started studying architecture. Brand new world opened up to me, right? Brand new world of architecture and of design. It wasn't just mechanical drafting, it wasn't just connecting lines or making blueprints, but this world of design. And then through this world of design, there was this discussion, right, in design theory classes about what is your inspiration, right? So lots of different kind of examples of inspiration. Studied architects from around the world and how they would come up and generate design ideas. At the same time, I was homesick. And for the first time, right, when I was in California, I felt like a Hawaiian, for some reason. I was like, shucks, I am Hawaiian, that's my identity. And when I came back, right, for holidays or Christmases or summers, I would try and dive into as much of understanding my culture as possible, recognizing that my youth, I had very little cultural understanding. Then I graduated, so this is still in that second period of time. I worked for an international firm that was based here in Hawaii. It's called Wimberley Allison Tongan-Ku, now known as WATG, one of the foremost hospitality architects in the world. Amazing story, born and raised in Hawaii and now a global company. I was sent off within my first year to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This was the time when the Petronas Towers were being built. We were designing the Mandarin Oriental Hotel right next to it. And at the same time, we were working on the Eastern and Oriental Hotel, which is one of the kind of classic grand dames of Raffles and those types of hotels on Penang, a little island off the coast of Malaysia. Amazing experience. I was 25 years old. I had a $35 a day expense account. I would eat dollar noodles and like pocket 20 bucks a day. It was super cool. And I was sitting amongst these really talented architects, Chinese and Malay and Indian and Filipino, and people that had grown up in this culture. And I, a Hawaiian Chinese haole from Hawaii, was in Kuala Lumpur trying to interpret their culture into design. Excited? As I went through it though, I was like, something was weird about this dynamic. I was sitting there, I was asking my counterparts, right, who were working for the Malay firm, like, how did you grow up? Where did you live? What kind of places did you go to? What kind of traditions did you follow? And as they were sharing that with me, it became obvious that they knew more about their culture and potentially how to influence their own design than I did. At the same time, I was feeling like, what am I doing in Kuala Lumpur? So the opportunity arose by happenstance, right? Kind of an Asian economic crisis at the time. I came back home, and the first project that I was able to work on was Kuhio Beach Park in Waikiki. Tremendous history. At the time, I had to delve into that history and what Waikiki meant, and I'll show a little bit of that today. And it kind of set this path where I decided that, number one, my professional goals will be to influence our design work with examples of the cultures of Hawaii. First and foremost Hawaiian, because that's the indigenous culture of Hawaii. And then layered on top of that, all the ethnicities that have come and shaped who I am, who my sons are, the ethnicities that are represented in this room today. So with that, I'm gonna talk about indigenous approach. I don't have a specific project. I won't go deep into a specific project. I'll start high level and kind of work my way through. I haven't done a library in my career. Serendipitously though, since Clem and I had spoken, we have 3 now in our office. So we're doing a renovation of Midkiff Library on Kamehameha School's campus. So this is a native Hawaiian school here in Hawaii, and transforming, I would say, this library into a learning center. So the new library, right, of sorts. That's an interesting project. I have another project for the Department of Education. That's a public library in Wahiawa, who is a town in kind of central Oahu that has tremendous Native Hawaiian history, but also has a history of plantation ethnicities that have come in and have influenced and kind of become what Wahiawa is known for. In that project, we are designing a traditional library for the community, blended with space for the community college, blended with office space for the Department of Education. I won't go too much into detail, but the partie that was given to us was library on one floor, DOE on one floor, and community college on the other floor, and our first party is to bust that up and try and integrate. DOE's pushing back, we're pushing forward, we'll see where it all ends up. The last project is for Iolani School, another private school here in the Waikiki kind of area, and for them they are embracing the opportunity to engage traditional library space with contemporary learning space, with classroom and activity levels. So very excited about that project as well. So to get started, I guess the approach that we begin talking about is the origin from a Hawaiian perspective. So the Hawaiian creation story is known as the Kumulipo. I'm going to give you the abridged version, but in the Kumulipo, Papa and Wakea, Father Sky and Mother Earth unite. And in their unification, there was then the next set of people that came from through it. So the first child born in the Hawaiian genealogy story was known as Holoa. Holoa was born still. He was born still, and their parents planted him into the earth. As they planted him into the earth, the story is that the first kalo, or taro, came to life. The second born was known as man, Haloa's brother. And the symbiotic relationship began between man and land, not just one of use, but one of familial relationship. That's kind of has been, and something that we've taken forward as kind of the basis of the work that we do. That for our work to be good, we need to find ways to balance the impacts of land and man and hope that they work in a symbiotic relationship. In Hawaiian history, that was probably best represented in a system of land division known as the Ahupua'a. See many locals in the audience, so you guys are very familiar with the Ahupua'a concept. I know that there are people traveling from other places. The Ahupua'a was a division of land that stretched from the mountaintops to the outer edges of our nearshore reef environment. So it was like a pie-shaped land division. The illustration on the side on this side, from Maryland, Kahalewai, is one that's taught in our schools today. It's an illustration that tries to encapsulate what the modern ahupua'a, or what the Hawaiian ahupua'a would look like. So you see, typically they would be in and around the watershed, right? So water would fall at our mountains, it would come through a watershed and distribute into our nearshore reef environments. As the water was coming through our fertile kind of valley lands, right, we would use those lands as areas for agriculture. So towards the middle, you see agriculture. So you hear of our lo'i taro, right, our lo'i kalo, or areas that we would cultivate. And then as we came back further to Makai, we would see our kauhale, our villages in and around kind of the ocean setting. Each house in the kauhale had a specific function, so you would have a gathering house, an eating house, sleeping house. Oftentimes there was a halal va'a, right? I mean, a place for canoe and for voyaging. We had nearshore fish ponds. That would be our refrigerators and feed the people. That would allow for aquaculture and cultivation. And then on the right-hand side, you see a map of Oahu. The big kind of designations are known as moku. They're a collection of ahupua'a. And then particularly today, I'll be talking about some examples in the Kona region. So we're in Kona right now, in the Kona moku. And then we'll specifically talk, it's really tough to tell here, but there's some little red lines that go through that designate the ahupua'a in these areas. So I think many people in Hawaii are knowledgeable about the ahupua'a. I think the people in Hawaii also are knowledgeable about it as a means of sustainable living, right? That within one ahupua'a, the idea was that you'd have the sustenance to sustain a people. Many indigenous people here in the audience, we as Hawaiians believe that we were the most sustainable people in the history of the world. That we have lived isolated and 2,000 miles away from anyone for a millennium. And in doing so, it was this kind of system of the ahupua'a. So we know it as an ecological kind of sustainability, but it was also an environmental way of sustaining the land. We had social political structure that was engaged in the ahupua'a that would allow for relationships between different ahupua'a and within the moku. And each moku then would have a relationship with the next moku. So if my ahupua'a was rich in fish and yours was rich in taro, that we would have an economic system as well that would allow us to sustain ourselves. And ultimately, this was all based in a cultural framework where the Hawaiian principles and values were established. So the first thing that I'd like to kind of share about our approach is our approach, we turn tomorrow's ahupua'a. So in our current work, right, whether it's site-specific or area-specific or a grander kind of area, and I'll read, tomorrow's ahupua'a will learn from the traditions, values, and aspirations of the host culture, the Hawaiians, to develop a cultural approach to sustainability which celebrates the proper balance of its environmental, social, political, and economic resources. We look to the wisdom of the past to build a bright new future. Nana i mua, nana i hope. This is the ahupua'a we're in right now. So we are probably like right where the A in Mānoa is in this room. Waikiki, everybody knows Waikiki, right? Just Makai from us is probably one of the world's most famous resort destinations. I live in the very back of Mānoa, right around this area and through here. Took me about 7 minutes to drive here this morning, and if you jumped in your car and later, I think, Clem, tonight you're going down to Waikiki, probably take you 7, maybe 12, you know. So, I mean, you get a sense of where this ahupua'a is. You see there are major tributaries, the kind of waterways, the watersheds that come through here. These are two significant kind of ridgeways but the main is known as Mānoa Stream, and it comes down historically and currently, right, and sometimes in modern engineered ways, and channeled through Waikiki and enters into the South Shore of Oahu. In the right around 2010, President Obama, Kama'aina, put forth a $1 billion proposal to municipalities who had experienced a national disaster. And it was a competition that would award up to $200 million per municipality for the best idea to create some resilience moving forward. This was right around the time of 100 Resilient Cities movement that was going on throughout the world as well. So we quickly kind of put together this tomorrow's ahupua'a approach and look to approach Waikiki as an example. In tomorrow's ahupua'a, and in the spirit of nana I mua nana I hope, we divide into 3 periods of time: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. In yesterday, right, we say, WCIT, right, as we say that yesterday was pre-Western contact. So that's the period of time. Today, we date from Western contact, Captain Cook's arrival, through today, right, March 15th. And tomorrow is our plans moving forward. So yesterday, we dove into a pretty significant study of what this area was, its cultural uses. We call it wahipana, or storied, or hallowed places and spaces. We looked at as many cultural maps as we could and started to overlay them over the top. This entire area is known as Waikiki. I grew up on the Big Island, so I'm not necessarily from Oahu, but I know Waikiki my entire life as Waikiki. I never knew there was a Kalia, or a Kalua Okao, or a Helomua, and I would venture to say that most people of my age that even grew up on Oahu did not know that either. So just the reintroductions of names were specifically important, but also uses. We take the historical maps and then we start to overlay the contemporary maps, right? So what's there now? Well, we've got 30,000 hotel rooms in Waikiki right now. We've got infrastructure that leads us in and out. We've got a nearshore environment that's known as one of the most famous beaches in the world that needs to be maintained and sustained. So we put all that onto its existing plan, and then we start laying in proposals for tomorrow to create a composite of ideas that respect the past, that acknowledge the present, and look for creative ideas moving forward. In this example, we show coastal environment ideas, watershed ideas, renewable energy, and circulation in public space. Waikiki is an interesting place. It was never a beach, right? So Waikiki was kind of marshlands when contact. It was still a beautiful place, and Ali'i would go there, Maka'ainana would go there to enjoy its kind of coastal environment. But the beach is man-made. And because it's man-made and there's no necessary way to sustain the beach in its kind of current location, what happens is tidal and wave influence sweeps away the beach and deposits it right outside offshore. So periodically, right, what we need to do is we need to go and we dredge all the sand off our reefs, which kill our reefs because the sun can't get down in there and have thriving reefs. And we come back and we try and replenish our beach. Well, our proposal was this whole area shown in blue is known as the Hamu Hamu fishery. Queen Liliuo'okalani had a fishery here during her reign. And the intent was to relieve the sand on a continuous basis and restore the fishery of Hamu Hamu. In doing so, we'd replenish the beach, But not only replenish the beach, which, you know, somewhat looks like this is a little dated photo, but somewhat looks like this today. And I'll just toggle back and forth. With about 100 feet, right, of new sand that's already on our reefs, but also fortifying our coastline with native vegetation. In this area, we're using coconut trees, was brought by the canoes when the Hawaiians arrived, and I'll tell you stories, historical stories of Waikiki and the coconut trees moving forward. That is to help with tidal inundation, but there's also fear, right, of flooding coming from the Mauka area. So in doing so, we also looked at the watershed. We have a large golf course known as the Alawai Golf Course, and through here, historical ways, including Hawaiian historical ways of dealing with sedimentation that comes down, was to retain the sedimentation and then allow it to filter out to the ocean. That was our fish ponds. It would bring the nutrients from the Mauka sections and deposit it into the fish ponds. It would help the fish to grow, of which then we would eat and recreate. So the proposal was to allow for the sedimentation to collect, for us to use that within our watershed and at the Alawai Golf Course to potentially build back in some of the fish ponds that used to exist in Waikiki, and then to allow for cleaner waters entering our nearshore reef environments. Proposal as such. It's also an opportunity for renewable energy. We all know examples of using water as a resource for producing energy. In our world, and with unique ingenuity that's coming from Hawaii, there's a concept known as seawater air conditioning, where you pull in deep sea cold water, heat exchange it, and use that for the chilled water that's used for district cooling. So the idea of potentially using our natural resources to produce cooling, which, as I had mentioned, is 30,000 rooms or 30,000 tons, for those of you who understand mechanical systems of cooling within Waikiki. Also allowing for the flushing of our Alawai Canal, which is on the surface maybe a beautiful canal, but has its challenges as a coastal waterway. And then lastly, producing for these connections, right? We've identified all the public spaces within Waikiki, highlighted in green. We know of the importance of our Mauka to Makai, or mountain to ocean connectivity, to influence these Mauka Makai connections and make them pedestrian and accessible, and to make these connections to our historical places going forward. A composite of what this proposal. I'll move to the next ahupua'a and maybe get a little bit more granular. The next ahupua'a takes us down into the Kaka'ako region, which is just kind of west of us, and then spans to Honolulu Harbor and downtown Honolulu. We had done studies in this area. This is an aerial photograph of the area. At the time, we were doing work for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs for some parcels that they had gotten, oceanfront parcels, here in this region. Same principle. We took all our historical documents. We spoke to kupuna elders. We looked at Hawaiian language newspapers. We explored mele, or songs and chants of the area, to try and recreate what this area might have looked like during that time period. Many kind of interesting examples that I could delve kind of deep into, but the two that I'll just highlight was the evidence of salt pans in this area. So I mean, we all as indigenous people kind of understand the importance of salt in culture and sustaining culture. In Hawaiian terms, we would actually create these kind of salt beds. Salt water, ocean water would be put in, and as it evaporates, right, we would get our salt. It would often then be tainted by the dirt, right, that was in that, and would color our salt as well. So you'd see, if you go to the store, you can find alai salt, that's red salt, right, that's tainted by the dirt that's in the area. Also of interest, though, two parts, was the coastline as it existed prior to the reclamation of all this area in Kaka'ako. So our project was based here, and then we put on tomorrow's proposals, which also provided for the master plans of land ownership. So here we had Howard Hughes, Kamehameha Schools, and Office of Hawaiian Affairs for a composite map that looks at such. We get fascinated, we dive into these types of things, we use this as a reference that we can go back and forth on. Again, the composite on how that comes together, and then specifically the example for a project we were doing here. Nearshore coastal waters, the area is known as Kukulu Aiho. The story, the traditional story, was one of a father and son that came, demigods, that came through and taught to Hawaiians how to fish. They had magic fishing tools. We used that story to influence our design. The idea that we could use these examples of history and culture and name into affecting the building design. And the final design concept was one of the Hawaiian net, throw net. We draped that over the top of two towers that were side by side, like father and son. One which was more regular, facing west, the setting sun, representing father. One that had more movement to it, shorter, facing east, the rising sun that represented sun, with the idea of the net draped over it like the image on the top. I know building design. Our intent is not to recreate architecture of the past, right? Indigenous architecture of the past, but to use indigenous ways and thinking, presenting ideas moving forward. Tomorrow's all for. The second component of our thinking is mo'o. Mo'o speaks to lineage. If you ask my wife what the mo'o is, my wife would say it's the lizard that runs around our house, that she yells at me to go get. But mo'o in Hawaiian terms also means lineages, these concepts of lineages. Born and raised in Hilo, these are ponds called Lalakea in Hilo. They're really just a magical place. In kind of 2010 thereabouts, we began writing a story. The story started to influence the design of the house. We created a book. It's called Amanui. It first started as a children's book with this idea that this legendary crab was protecting this pond because the pond was so special, and then you had these kind of angry pigs that would come down and they would eat in excess and use the resources in excess, and the crab would sustain and provide for peace through this period of time. Through this, we created this kind of methodology, and I won't bog you down in the Hawaiian terms, but from top left to top right to bottom left to bottom right. Genealogy, stories, journeys, and values. These all are influences as we move forward. So in the creation of the book, we went to genealogy. Edith Kanaka-Ole, one of our revered kupuna, wrote a story of this area. We represented this through the coastline and painting, and represented the fact that this is a place of importance. The story we told was a new one, right? I mean, we have old stories, but we can make new stories too, right? And these new stories will continue on and become old stories as time goes by. So you see these angry pua'a eating and drinking in excess, and how we need to lead more sustainability. But through the course of this book, we'd also use this as a way to show children architectural diagrams. And this architectural diagrams would inspire the design of the home as time goes by. In a segment of the book, through mo'oka'i, or the journey, we call mo'oka'i the journey, right? So we consider design a journey. It's a sequencing of events and ideas leading you to a solution. So the idea here is that the host is a amanui, it's the crab. It's the crab that sits on the perch of this pond and protects. But through this process of battling the pua'au, one of the crab's eyes was taken, so he only has one eye now. And you know, the one eye starts to represent as a lookout, right, in the home that comes through. And the mo'ovaivai, right, so why? The values. We purposely, through the course creation of this book, used Hawaiian terms interchangeably. We do that in our kind of normal day in life, right? I'll say aloha clam, you know, ahuio. We'll say these words kind of intermixed. And we purposely didn't want to call out definitions of Hawaiian terms as we went through the book. We wanted it to read as such. So in doing so, we needed a glossary, but instead of doing a standard glossary, we wanted to do something a little more illustrative and accessible to the children. And then ultimately, right, the mo'ovaivai, the value, the reason, I did that for my family. It was purely, you know, personal kind of project. So these are my two boys, Ian Makana and Eli Makali'i, represented in the story by the two turtles, and the boys are here. Big hands up, boys. Here as well. So this methodology, and I know I'm running short on time, but this methodology has really kind of guided the majority of our work moving forward. I'll just give you a few examples. This again is Mānoa. This is the ahupua'a of Waikiki, and specifically we'll be looking at Waikiki and through here. Contemporary Waikiki, historical overlays of Waikiki and the names. Kalua o Kau is an example of a place at the international marketplace. So many are aware of it because it was this kind of kitschy Hawaiian shopping center, right? A kind of bazaar of sorts. Don Ho made the area famous. It's really kind of tiki culture, 1960s Hawaii calls. And then the second area, Halamoa. It's where the Royal Hawaiian Hotel is. The mo'olelo, right, of Kolu'okau was of Queen Emma and her lands, which is still part of Queen Emma Foundation's land holdings now, and the proceeds from International Marketplace and their land holdings in Waikiki go to support Queen's Medical Center, which is the largest health center in the state of Hawaii. So this perpetual kind of giving continues. Here too, though, we had heard of Queen Emma and her journey to Kolu'okau, to experience Kolu'okau, which is a star constellation known as Pleiades in Hawaiian Makali'i. And that in her journey, right, Hawaiian studies would look at looking down at the reflection in water to study the stars. This is Mauna Kea, Lake Wai'ao. Halamoa. Literal translation, chicken scratch. It was said that a chief had come, that a phantom rooster had come. The chief instructed his people to plant a coconut tree where the chicken had scratched. And in doing so was the first tree of Halamoa, known to have been 10,000 coconut trees during our lifetime. International Marketplace. Our job was to do 3 courtyards. We teamed the courtyards Mauka to Makai. In the Mauka section, we talked about the reign of Manoa, of the ideas of rainbows, contemporary interpretations, but based in Hawaiian lore. So we came through the Queen's Court. This is Queen Emma's court. It's the center court. We had opportunities to create statuary of Queen Emma and her family. We have her mele throughout this courtyard, but we also were able to do a water feature that was reflective of that journey and story of Queen Emma going to Lake Wai'ao and reflecting, looking down to see up. So wonderful water features that is enjoyed by many. And then the banyan court, 100-plus-year-old banyan tree. We did a model of this tree, 8 million points. It crashed all the computers in our office. We asked them to dummy it down some. But we were actually able to weave new architecture in and through the historic tree house that used to be here that during Don Ho's time, they used to broadcast AM radio and Hawaiian music to the mainland, a very historic area. The Royal Hawaiian Hotel has its similar history. In our creation, in this case, right, we were peeling away instead of creating new. Over its, at the time, 85-year history, just places had been filled in. The courtyard had been muddied. The arrival sequence had been confusing. So our idea was to peel back and restore the native grounds of Helemoa. In doing so, we started to recreate the grandeur of Helemoa. And then recreated spaces. These were all infilled retail, kind of kishi retail shops at one point in time. This is the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, probably the most famous hotel in the world, right? The Pink Palace of the Pacific. So we were able, a lot of these, I mean, these columns were behind walls and behind wallpaper and things like that, and able to open it back up to the Royal Grove of Helemoa, that area, that 10,000 coconut trees once existed. Very proud and many examples of how we were able to influence culture into the design at the international marketplace as specific and as actual and as non-abstract as statuary, right? Whether it's Queen Emma or Don Ho. The representation, though, more, less literal, of Apua Kehau, the stream that came through. The mele of Queen Emma. Within the buildings and the architecture, and then these examples of kind of unique features that identify. And then the mo'ovaivai, right? I mean, you can think about this all you want, you can overthink, you can over-design, but ultimately this is the kind of places that we're trying to create, right? This little boy knows nothing about Kalo'okao. There's nothing that he's playing in a star constellation, right? He's just having fun, so there's opportunities. I'll leave you just with two these probably are the most inspirational stories of my entire career. So as we were doing this, Hawaiian burials are a huge issue here, right? Hawaiian burials were done unmarked and in jaque sand, right? So native sand and not buried very deep. Within my professional lifetime, there have been times when burials were just pushed aside. Within my professional lifetime, there's been the creation of Native Hawaiian burial councils and practices put in place to preserve our burials in the most respectful manner possible. Within my professional career, we've gone from reinterment, which oftentimes means unidentified finds being reinterred in areas where they may not be disturbed in the future, to a more present moment of trying to retain in place, to not disturb. This is the first time that I know of in my professional career lifespan where we were able to identify native burials in place and retain them in place through the entire demolition and reconstruction of the building. In doing so, right, and this is an old photo, this is, I think, like a Tumi shop, and this is like, I don't know, some other jeweler in this area here. But this is within the main concourse on the ground floor of some of the most expensive retail on the planet. We were able to convince our client, and with their support, and with Queen Emma as the landowner, to create a space to allow for the cultural and lineal descendants to access and pay respects on a regular basis. We activated that space through design, right, that told a little bit of the story. We're highlighting native species and the stories of this area through this space. And beyond, though, we were able to create a sanctuary for the iwi kupuna, or Native Hawaiian burials in the area. Same too for Royal Hawaiian. I'll just end on one story. So I mentioned the Royal Grove of 10,000 coconut trees. In this grove right here, there were probably about 50 coconut trees that were probably near 80 to 90 feet tall. As coconut trees go, right, they get thinner and thinner, and the danger is at the tops, right, they fall off. In Hawaii too, right, in our retail environment, or in our kind of hospitality environments, you go and look, there's no coconuts or coconut trees because they're dangerous. If they fall, hit somebody, right, it could be fatal. So you'll never see coconuts propagated in our resort environments. As we went through the design, these coconut trees, some 80, 100 years old, that were definite descendants of this royal grove of Halamoa, of 10,000 coconut trees that started with this phantom rooster scratch, we had to cut them down. And that was kind of like an epiphany, right? Like, how can we cut down these royal groves, and what would we do, right? These are the keiki. We went through cultural practitioners, we talked about the idea, and finally came up with a method of approaching it. So we did cut down the trees. They were going to fall and die as we went forward. As we did, though, we sent out a call to pahu drum makers, and we wanted to give away these stumps. So pahu drums are these native drums that are made. Pahu drum makers pulled up with their pickup trucks and threw these stumps in the back as the hotel was closed, and went away. Fast forward, a year and a half later, we're at the hotel opening, and literally, like, we're standing here in a big ceremony, right? All the dignitaries around, and you have these trucks of pahu drum makers coming back. And they all brought back the biggest drum, right, the temple drums, as a gift back to the place. So the royal, I get a chicken skin right now. I get it every time I tell the story. But the pahu drums, right, the royal grove lives in Waikiki. These pahu drums are in the lobby. If you're ever in the Royal Hawaiian, go check them out. There's a whole collection spread throughout the hotel, but the royal grove of Halamoa lives. Even better though, right? These landscapers who have been the grounds people who have been with the hotel some 40, 50 years, unbeknownst to everyone, would propagate these coconuts, right, that they would cut. And they've been regrowing the royal grove of Halamoa for like 50 years over here, maybe 100 years, near 100 years. So when it came time to replant the royal grove, the groundskeepers brought back actual keiki of the royal grove of Halamoa. In the course of what we do, there's actual ways of influencing design through ethnic ways, through indigenous ways. The way we approach it is first looking for man and land and the balance, right? If man is dominating land, it's out of balance. If land is not in connectivity with man, that balance is severed as well. We also, and encourage all to know your history and your genealogy and not be afraid to tell it, to tell your stories, to look for ways to tell your stories through design. And it's okay to write new stories, right? To continue to write new stories. To embrace the journey, right? We all know these kind of epic terms, right? Like on these epic journeys, it's about the journey and not the destination, but it truly is, right? Even through design. And then ultimately know that design matters, it lives. And if you can walk away from your project with special moments that allow for culture to live moving forward, you've done a good job. So nanai mua nanai.